Okay, I just want to start out here and just give a little kind of a preface to the next books that we'll be covering, and that's First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, and First and Second Chronicles. And just before we get into actually the content, I just want to kind of give an overview of the whole what we'll be looking at. First Samuel begins with the story of Samuel and his rise to prominence, and in essence, what we have here is Samuel is the last of the judges, and we're moving into a whole new era. Samuel, comes on the scene. He's a prophet, but he's the last one to kind of rise up and be the judge in Israel. And God uses him to anoint the first two kings of Israel, which are Saul and David. And so First Samuel is basically it includes Samuel's beginning. It's basically Saul's biography. The story of Saul as king of Israel and his relationship with David and the development there, the things that happened, both the good and the bad and the ugly. And so what we've got is First Samuel covers the life of Saul, the kingly reign of Saul. So it starts from Samuel's birth to basically the end of Saul's reign. And Second Samuel then basically covers David's story, from Saul's death to David's old age. And then, so we got the first two kings in Israel. Those are the only times when, we got one king coming after David, Solomon, where the nation was all one. And it's a short period of time where Israel was united. And so we move into First and Second Kings. What we get there is First Kings takes up the post-David life and starts out with the David on his deathbed and the crowning of Solomon after Adonijah has already claimed to be king. So it takes us through, after David's life, the division of the nation into two. They've got the northern kingdom, which is the 10 tribes of what called the 10 tribes of Israel, just called Israel. And then the two southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, which are usually just called Judah. So the nation's divided into two lines, and the kings that reign over Judah are of the line of David. The kings that reign in Israel, not so. So we've got the promised line, the promises that God made, operating through the line of Judah in the southern kingdom, which is called Judah. So First and Second Kings takes us through both nations, their kings, both Judah and Israel, until the Babylonian captivity, when not only Israel has been overtaken before that by Assyria, and then Babylon invades Judah and takes over Judah, and all because of the sinfulness of the nation. Okay, so they're finally taken into captivity, and First and Second Kings takes us all the way through that. When we get to Chronicles, First and Second Chronicles deals with primarily the same era. It's dealing primarily with the kings of Judah. It does go a little farther in that it's got a lot of genealogy, even starting, I think it starts with Adam, and so they try and bring all of history, of mankind history up, and it'll take us once again to the end of the existence of Judah as an independent nation when it's the defeated with Babylon. So First and Second Chronicles covers a lot of the same information, gives us a little different perspective. Now some of the things you might notice if you read carefully is in Samuel, when David has an adulterous relationship with Bathsheba, it's a major part of the story. In Chronicles, it's completely left out. Okay, so it's like people are the reason for the books are for different reasons. One, basically, First and Second Chronicles is basically to take us through the line of Judah and show us the continuous line, because that's the important thing, especially when we're looking at the Bible. They didn't even know it at the time, but we're looking at the Bible as a fulfillment of the line of the Messiah, Christ, and how it comes to the New Testament. And First and Second Chronicles take us through that history. So just to say just a little bit more about this, and this will be it, is these books, First and Second Samuel, the Kings and the Chronicles. Well, first of all, First and Second Samuel originally were just one book, and First and Second Kings were just one book. They've been separated, and a church father named Jerome is the one who named Chronicles. And when we look at the book of First and Second Chronicles, it is the last book in the Hebrew Bible. it ends with Chronicles. Ours is kind of more in the middle. It's a setup leading us into the prophets and some of the writings of Psalms. But the book set the backdrop basically for the messages of the prophets, who they spoke to, what was the situations in which they were speaking. So as we're looking through those books, then we can look at the prophets, and often when the prophets are mentioned, it'll say they prophesied during the reign of such and such a king. So if you pay attention to the kings, then when you're reading the prophets, you can understand, okay, what was going on during that time. And so it helps us give a backdrop going through this part to understand a little bit about the separation of the nations, what was going on with that, the invasion of Assyria. There was never recorded a king in Israel that was good all of his life. One guy started out great and didn't finish up too well. In Judah, there's a few that made it, but it's so amazing that so many times the ones that start out good really don't end up all that well. Which reminds me of this race I saw one time. It was a 2-mile race, and these guys, there's 2 young men in it that were really good 2-milers, and everybody was real anxious to watch them. Well, the race started, and this other guy just took off, and he started like sprinting around the track. And by they got 8 laps around the track. By the second one, he was like half a length of the track ahead of everybody else. But within minutes, he was in the middle of the football field, the infield, revisiting his breakfast or his lunch, and it made another appearance. And and it was really something. At the beginning of that race, I remember just trying to listen to the people, and everyone was like, "Wow, look at that, look at that, look at that." Well, the end of the race, these 2 guys that were so good, they ended up, after 2 miles, they were real close. It was like almost like a photo finish. They were right. It's hard to tell who won. And I started listening to the people. I was listening to the people around, thinking, will anyone mention the guy that took off early? And you know what? There was no mention of him at all. It doesn't matter as much how you start as it does how you finish. And this, as we're looking at these kings, it's kind of a sad story, and it's kind of a wonderful thing when there is somebody that perseveres to the end. I mean, a lot of the promises in the Bible are even for those who persevere to the end. So that's a trait, and we want to look at that as we're looking through these. But get an idea, read through it yourself, get an idea of who these people are. 1st and 2nd Samuel is a good read. It's just like reading biography. It's a really easier read than most other places in the Bible. But get an idea of who the kings are, where they were at, as best you can. You don't have to have all of that known to understand the prophets, but it helps having perspective of what the prophets were saying, who they were saying to, when they were saying, and what were the situations going on at that time.